there, friends. This is ComiCade with the Comic Collectors Guild. This is Forgotten Comics, where we go through comic books that are pretty much forgotten, and we talk about where they could be headed if they were continued today. Today's episode, The Black Condor. What happened to the Black Condor? Well, it's actually kind of hard for me to make a video about this specific character because the mantle of the Black Condor is just that. It's more like a mantle identity that one puts on versus a character that was one character passed down through generations. It's something that a person becomes, more or less. And it's had very many interpretations and different continuities through the multiverse of the DC Comics, but it didn't start necessarily in DC Comics. Let's go all the way back to the beginning to learn more about the Black Condor. The Black Condor was originally Richard Gray Jr., who first appeared in the Quality Comics-owned title, Crack Comics, issue 1 in 1940. Among the pages of the 1940s anthology comic, we were introduced to the Black Condor. We're shown a small expedition led by Major Richard Gray in Mongolia. They camp as his wife feeds their child. But as darkness descends, a group of raiders invade their camp. Mrs. Gray hides her child behind the rocks to protect him while the chaos ensues. The raiders kill everyone and take everything they can. The baby is the sole survivor of their camp and wanders away until it's discovered by a condor bird. The baby crawls to the edge of a cliff. Before he can fall off of this edge, the condor bird swoops down and carries it off to its nest. The boy is then raised as one of the condor's own baby birds. The other condors grow up capable of flight, but the human cannot fly and stays on Earth. He is determined to fly, though, so with that determination, he does. Unnaturally so. Now the birds and the man bird fly together. One day, the man bird was out foraging for food when attacked by giant eagles. He fell to the ground, and an old Mongolian mountain man finds him. He then nurses him back to health while teaching him how to speak as a human would, and not just to birds. A year passes, and he finds his mountain friend was also killed by the raiders. This man can't keep any friends besides condor birds. Everyone gets killed by raiders. Then the Birdman Richard Gray Jr. devotes his life to aiding humanity with his unexplained flight mutation. He later earns the name Black Condor. I don't necessarily know how the public knew that he was connected to black condors, but he's given the name Black Condor by people in journalism, becoming something of a legend. Then the rights to all of Quality Comics were acquired by DC Comics, most likely in December of 1956, when Quality Comics quit producing comic books. Along with many others, the Black Condor entered the DC universe, his story, his origins being retconned, with abilities having been granted by a radioactive meteor, and the whole power of flight thing making sense a little bit more. He also has telekinesis, and I think that was originally one of his powers as well, being introduced also as a member of the All-Star Squadron and then Freedom Fighters. In the years to come, he'd be a reoccurring addition to the Freedom Fighters. Their team primarily operated within the context of Earth X, or 10, but Earth X, which is basically a timeline in which Nazis won World War II, and the Freedom Fighters are the Resistance. From there, we get a new Black Condor in 1992, with a new person taking up the mantle, Ryan Kendall. This timeline did not take place on Earth X. In this series, he was experimented on by his grandfather and received the powers of flight, telekinesis, and healing. I think it's like quick healing, but all I could learn was that it was healing. His grandfather working for the organization called the Society of the Golden Wing, trying to make a flying man. Ryan was the first and only successful experiment. Eventually becoming a superhero, Ryan would work alongside hero teams and even briefly with Justice League International. His own series lasted for 12 issues. Then came another interpretation of the Black Condor in 2006 with Uncle Sam and the Freedom Fighters, featuring a man named John Trujillo, or Jillo, John Trujillo, mentioned in issue 2 and then introduced by issue 3 as the new Black Condor, confusingly given his powers by a spider goddess. This series had a total of 16 issues. Now we're going back to the timeline of the original Earth X, at least I think that's what this is. It's Earth X, and the continuity, I'm not following it hardcore, so I had to do my best to piece it all together. And honestly, this interpretation of the Black Condor in the series, I would be very much interested in reading. This is the most recent version of the Black Condor, Marcus Robbins, in the Freedom Fighter series of 2019. This run had 3 volumes and told a deep story featuring connecting history to the previous freedom fighters. Marcus took up the mantle after living life as a slave in this Nazi-owned world. Black people on this earth were tagged and treated like animals to serve the government. Originally to escape the slavery complex he and his family were trapped in, Marcus actually constructed the wingsuit himself that he wears today, eventually joining the freedom fighters in an effort to shut down this tyranny once and for all. Not only is this most recent run mutually enjoyed by many fans of the freedom fighters, but I personally can understand why this version of the Black Condor works very well. It isn't a man raised by condor birds, or experimented on by his weird grandpa, or a man granted strange abilities by a false god. This was a man, previously enslaved, who set out with intelligence and good people to fight for the freedom that they mutually deserved, but that he knew a personal lack of. Where can the Black Condor go from here? That is entirely up to the people over at DC Comics. But, I wouldn't say that he's been completely forgotten. I wouldn't. I'd say that he's just a bit off the mainstream. Thank you for joining me. Read comics and never forget, because the classics are coming back, baby, and they are coming sooner than you think. As always, keep it unreal.
I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky. Think about it every night and day.
Man, comics were weird in the 1940s, dude. Comics were weird.